serving the Republic of the Philippines for more than 75 years. Ito po ang Presidential Broadcast Service.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day, this is Dateline Malacañang and here are the news. Although the visit to Saudi Arabia was brief, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. said that it was a successful and productive one with various engagements accomplished to reaffirm the Philippines' commitment to the partnership between the Gulf Cooperation Council or GCC and Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN countries, as well as to promote the country to prospect investors. In his arrival speech following his visit to Riyadh, the president ticked off his accomplishments, mentioning the business-to-business agreements that would guarantee additional employment for Filipino workers. President Marcos described the ASEAN GCC summit held in Riyadh as a landmark event, adding that it was the first time that ASEAN and GCC member states gathered together to discuss regional and international issues and on future cooperation. The 6 GCC member countries are Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, while Brunei, Myanmar, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam compose the ASEAN. The president said that the summit provided an opportunity for the Philippines to secure a $120 million Memorandum of Understanding or MOU that would establish a 500-person capacity training facility in the country to upskill Filipino workers in the construction industry. Another 3 business-to-business agreements were also discussed among Saudi and Philippine human resource companies for the training and employment of Filipinos across a wide range of industries, including healthcare, hotel, restaurant and catering, and maintenance and operations, amongst other operations. President Marcos also reported resolving the outstanding bilateral issue with Kuwait at the sidelines of the summit, including working out the lifting of the deployment ban of Filipino workers. The president said he then had the opportunity to meet with the Crown Prince and Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, and he referred to their discussion as very encouraging, with anticipated capital investments pledged by the government of Saudi Arabia to the Philippines. In his arrival speech, President Marcos reiterated his commitment to continue to advance the country's interests and at the same time expand the Philippines' partnership with ally nations. In his speech during the summit, President Marcos emphasized further cooperation in key areas including energy and food security and enhancement of logistic chains. He also called for safeguarding of rights and welfare of Filipino workers.
Dateline Malacañang.
In related news, the Philippines and Saudi Arabia agreed on Friday to enhance trade and investments, labor cooperation, and tie-ups on renewable energy following the bilateral meeting of Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. and Saudi Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman. During the bilateral meeting at the sidelines of the First Association of Southeast Asian Nations, Gulf Cooperation Council or ASEAN GCC Summit, Prince Mohammed conveyed his interest to enhance trade and investments relations with the Philippines and also expressed keen interest in the Maharlika Investment Fund or MIF and more business-to-business engagements. The president responded by saying that the Philippines is willing to meet with Saudi businesses to learn how the Saudi sovereign wealth funds are structured so that the private sector can participate in the Maharlika Investment Fund, and to support and achieve Saudi's steady growth rate in line with its Vision 2030, the Crown Prince signified his desire to hire more Filipino workers whom he described as the best in the world. According to the Crown Prince, the kingdom needs large workforce, as he stressed the need for the Saudi population to grow to at least 60 million from the current 20 million, of which 14 million will comprise the kingdom's workforce. As a response, Marcos expressed the Philippines' willingness to assist Saudi Arabia in supplying skilled workers and professionals. The Crown Prince also mentioned during the meeting possible partnerships in renewable energy, noting that, for example, a Saudi company that produces solar panels for the whole Middle East and Africa could also invest in the country. The kingdom also wants to partner with the Philippines in the energy sector. The president emphasized the country's readiness to partner with the Saudi Arabia to boost the Philippines' clean energy supply. At the same time, President Marcos raised the Philippines' willingness to cooperate with Saudi Arabia to ensure food security by putting up agricultural products or projects for food production for Saudi Arabian market. The issue on the payment of benefits of Filipino workers who previously worked for Saudi companies that went bankrupt also emerged during the meeting, with the Saudi monarch saying that his government has set aside initial funding for their benefits. The Crown Prince told the president that the payment is still under process and that the kingdom is working on the details. President Marcos also congratulated Saudi Arabia for hosting the historic ASEAN GCC summit, noting its significant global impact in promoting international peace and security. Prince Mohammed expressed his intention to visit the Philippines, which was welcomed affirmatively by the president, and thus formally extended an invitation to the Crown Prince to undertake the visit. The two leaders earlier met in Bangkok, Thailand, at the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation or APEC Economic Leaders Meeting in November last year.
Dateline Malacañang.
Still on the sidelines of the ASEAN GCC summit, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. thanked Kuwaiti Crown Prince Sheikh Mishal on Friday for his openness to restart negotiations aimed at normalizing the Philippines-Kuwait relationship through an initial meeting of the two countries' foreign ministers. The Department of Foreign Affairs, or DFA, said that the initial meeting of the two countries' foreign ministers would focus on President Marcos's statements on the importance of guaranteeing the welfare and protecting the rights of Filipino workers abroad. The initial meeting of the ministers also highlighted the president's bilateral meeting with the Kuwaiti Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia at the sidelines of the ASEAN GCC summit, the DFA said, adding that both President Marcos and the Kuwaiti Crown Prince had reaffirmed their commitment to work together to resolve outstanding issues. The DFA said that the Kuwaiti Crown Prince requested a short and informal meeting with the president immediately after the summit, with the prince informing President Marcos of his country's urgent desire to normalize relations with the Philippines. The Kuwaiti leader apologized and told President Marcos that the narrow-mindedness of some of the Kuwaiti officials caused the breakdown of the negotiations between the Philippine and Kuwaiti delegations last May. The DFA said Sheikh Mishal expressed his highest respect for the Philippines and for the president's father, Ferdinand E. Marcos Sr., who extended help to Kuwait before. In a media interview in Riyadh, the president said that the resolution of the country's disagreement with Kuwait is one of the successes of his trip to Saudi Arabia to attend the ASEAN GCC summit. The Kuwaiti leader apologized to him, Marcos said, and vowed to fix its relations with the Philippines, noting the country's importance to Kuwait. The Philippine government temporarily banned the deployment of first-time household service workers to Kuwait amid concerns for their safety following the deaths of overseas Filipino workers or OFWs. Kuwait also imposed travel restrictions. According to available government data, the estimated number of Filipinos in Kuwait is 279,000 as of 2022. OFW remittances from Kuwait, meanwhile, amounted to $576,059 in 2021 and $579,186 last year.
Dateline Malacañang.
In other news stories, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. assured the overseas Filipino workers or OFWs and the Filipino community of the continued bilateral relationship or partnership between the Philippines and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, a legacy that his father and namesake former President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. has started in the 1980s. In his speech during the visit to the Filipino community in Riyadh, President Marcos emphasized that he will continue the good relationship forged by his father with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which until now is being enjoyed by Filipino workers in the Middle East. The chief executive emphasized that the governments of the Philippines and Saudi Arabia have always opened their lines to discuss whatever issues that may arise between the two countries, especially on the welfare and concerns of the OFWs and the Filipino community. President Marcos said his father visited Saudi Arabia in 1982, where he met His Majesty King Khalid bin Abdulaziz Al Saud to renew the good relations between the Philippines and Saudi Arabia and to reassure the kingdom that both countries will remain good friends. The Philippines recognized the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on November 15, 1949, and both countries established diplomatic relations on October 24, 1969. The two countries will mark the 54th anniversary of their diplomatic ties this year.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, the Philippine Department of Budget and Management has approved next year's budgetary requirement of the Department of Social Welfare and Development or DSWD for the scaled-up implementation of Walang Gutom 2027, a flagship program of the Marcos administration. DSWD Undersecretary Edu Punay said in a news forum in Quezon City that the DSWD is still in the pilot implementation of the food stamp program, which will run until the middle of next year. The agency's target is 3,000 families in 5 pilot sites that include households in Tondo in Manila, Dapa in Siargao, San Mariano in Isabela, Garchi Torena in Camarines Sur, and Parang in Maguindanao. Punay said the aforementioned pilot sites were identified with the help of the program's partner implementer, which is the United Nations World Food Program. It is noted that Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. issued Executive Order or EO number 44 that institutionalizes the food stamp program, which is being carried out through a whole of government approach with the DSWD acting as lead agency.
Dateline Malacañang.
In other news stories, a China Coast Guard or CCG vessel collided with a Philippine supply boat which was on a regular rotation and resupply or RORE mission to the detachment manning the BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal on Sunday morning. A statement from the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea, or NTF-WPS, said dangerous blocking maneuvers by the CCG caused the collision. The NTF-WPS did not specify what damage UNISA May 2 sustained in the collision or whether it completed its mission. It added that the RORE mission was ongoing with UNISA May 1 or UM1 already with BRP Sierra Madre troops. The NTF-WPS noted that relevant authorities have been briefed about the incident. The United States and Canada denounced China's latest disruption of a Philippine resupply mission to Ayungin Shoal. U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines Mary Kay Carlson said it put the lives of Filipino service members at risk. Meanwhile, Canadian Ambassador to the Philippines David Hartman said they stand in full unity with the Philippines in defense of its territorial integrity and the upholding of international law, and condemned the unlawful and dangerous conduct of the CCG. He also commended the professionalism and restraint exercised by the Philippine Coast Guard, or PCG. Meanwhile, European Union Ambassador to the Philippines Luc Veron said these incidents, their repetition and intensification, are dangerous and very disturbing. On October 13, a People's Liberation Army Navy ship closely tailed and conducted dangerous maneuvers while BRP Benguet was en route to another RORE for the military detachment in Rizal Reef.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippine Department of Social Welfare and Development, or DSWD, has provided assistance to the second batch of Filipino repatriates who arrived in the Philippines from Israel on October 20. DSWD Assistant Secretary for Strategic Communication, Romel Lopez, on Sunday said government officials, including Assistant Secretary for Statutory Programs, Ada Colico, welcomed the 18 returning OFWs upon their arrival at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport Terminal 3. The DSWD has so far assisted 34 overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs, through its Assistance to Individuals in Crisis Situation, or AICS program. Lopez said each repatriated OFW received 10,000 pesos worth of cash aid and another 10,000 pesos worth of food assistance. Aside from the DSWD, the Department of Migrant Workers also vowed to provide livelihood, financial support, and job facilitation through its reintegration program. More Filipinos from Gaza and Israel are expected to be repatriated in the coming days and will also receive the same financial assistance and other support services from the government, according to Lopez.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippine Department of Agriculture, or DA, said local government units, or LGUs, must not hesitate or delay declaring states of calamities once African swine fever, or ASF, outbreaks are confirmed. In an interview, DA Undersecretary Deogracias Victor Savellano said LGUs coping with the highly infectious animal disease badly need funds for enhanced biosecurity measures. Savellano cited the province of Nueva Vizcaya, which had an outbreak of ASF in 133 piggeries spread across 9 towns, as a prime example of a jurisdiction that immediately needs funding. The province's Sangguniang Panlalawigan declared a state of calamity on October 16 after the provincial veterinarian announced that almost 1,300 hogs in the affected piggeries tested positive for ASF. An initial estimate by the Nueva Vizcaya Provincial Veterinary Office placed industry losses due to ASF at about 20 million pesos. Elsewhere in the country, more limited states of calamity declarations were made this month, like in the towns of Cahidyocan, and San Fernando in Romblon, Sibuyan Island. Saveliano explained that state of calamity declarations open doors for the release of state and provincial funds set aside for crisis situations. He also urged LGUs in jurisdictions affected by ASF to allocate their own counterpart funds to supplement the national government budget. The official said the DA is reviewing 2 prospective ASF vaccines, and the agency is in the process of streamlining its process for approving veterinary pharmaceuticals. Saveliano also called on more animal pharmaceutical companies to submit their prototype vaccines for government testing in order to hasten the potential approval. Once an effective vaccine is approved, he said it is the DA's goal to inoculate up to 80% of the country's swine population. Saveliano lamented, however, that Congress is only poised to allocate around 1.5 billion pesos for the DA's anticipated ASF vaccination effort in 2024, just enough to pay for the inoculation of about 20% of the swine population. Dr. Arlene Vitiaco, Bureau of Animal Industry Deputy Director, said in a recent statement that National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council guidelines mandate that provincial governments with ASF outbreaks in more than 2 of their towns are obliged to declare states of emergency. She explained that such a declaration is a prerequisite to the release of disaster funds, which can then be used to contain the outbreak.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, Philippine Department of Trade and Industry or DTI Undersecretary Rafaelita Aldaba said the agency is eyeing economic zones solely for electric vehicles or EV manufacturing, including parts and components. Aldaba said on the sidelines of the 11th Philippine Electric Vehicle Summit in Pasay City over the weekend that having ecozones and industrial parks that can host all manufacturing activities related to e-vehicle sector will cut the logistics cost and could make e-vehicle prices compete with internal combustion engine vehicles. This initiative is part of the Electric Vehicle Incentive Scheme or EVIS drafted by the DTI to stimulate the local production of e-vehicles and EV parts and components. The trade official added that the agency will be coordinating with investment promotion agencies that manages ecozones like the Philippine Economic Zone Authority or PEZA, among others. Companies are more encouraged to locate their projects within ecozones like PEZA as they provide one-stop shop service to investors, which eases doing business in the country. Ecozone locators receive fiscal and non-fiscal incentives under the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Law, depending on their activities and impact of their projects to the economy. Under the EVIS, the government targets to locally produce 4 million e-vehicles, with raw materials, parts, and components also being manufactured in the country.
Dateline Malacañang.
And finally, State-run Land Bank of the Philippines or Land Bank said its net income in the first 9 months of the year reached an all-time high of 31.85 billion pesos. In a statement, the bank said the profit during the period was higher by 24% than the 25.7 billion pesos recorded last year. It also exceeded the target of 26.3 billion pesos for the first 3 quarters by 5.6 billion pesos and represents 90.9% of the 35 billion pesos full-year target for 2023. Interest income from loans and investments reached 91.5 billion pesos, up by 35.9% year-on-year, while total assets likewise grew by 11.5% to 3.1 trillion pesos from 2.8 trillion pesos last year. The increase was driven by the 12.8% year-on-year expansion of deposits, which amounted to 2.7 trillion pesos. Land Bank's capital, meanwhile, also went up by 21.9% to 249.2 billion pesos from 204.4 billion pesos in 2022, exceeding the full-year target of 243.8 billion pesos for 2023. The bank's capital adequacy ratio was at 16.15% and Common Equity Tier 1 at 15.30%, both well above the minimum requirements of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP.
Dateline Malacañang.
And that concludes today's edition of Dateline Malacañang. Don't forget to follow the social media accounts or pages of Radyo Pilipinas World Service for important news updates. This has been Steph Vicente. Good day and stay safe, everyone.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.